Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'll show you our new garden. It's been a while since I posted anything, but we kept filming, and today we'll go back in summer a little bit and I show you the cleanup of our property, and also I'll make a little garden tour to show you what we have here and what I'm planning to do in our garden. The cleanup process took several weeks. The weeds here were just huge. I used to think that the worst garden weed was a gout weed, but compared to what we had here, the gout weed is just a nice little thing. Some of the burdocks here had as thick stems as my arm, and they were over 2 meters high. As a child, I loved to collect these clinging balls and to make all sorts of figurines out of them, so I didn't really expect anything bad, well, except for the bushes were so big, but then I realized the devilish essence of this plant. The burdock dried out instantly in the sun, and that's when the real hell began. When I picked the cut stems, dry burdock fruits tried to cling to my gloves, stuck to my cloth, and several more days after that I found them in the most unexpected places. The worst was that long branches drooped and clung to my hair during the work. And the second malicious weed that I had to deal with here was some kind of wormwood. It was also very tall and it was blooming, so that huge clouds of pollen raised with the slightest movement, making us sneeze and cough. At some point, I even had to work in a respirator. We had to mow the weeds several times to clean up everything completely. And we had to use a cotton knife for our trimmer as the weed stems were so thick. Guess what? We've even got an unexpected harvest, a little zucchini from the ex-owners.
Урожай тебе несу.
Ого!
На. Там еще, кажется, помидорка была зеленая.
First, we took turns while mowing and then decided to split up. Gary would mow the weeds and I would collect the grass and make a compost heap. I used a rake first, but carrying the stems in arms resulted much faster. I ended up with a huge heap. Gary wanted to make a composter, but then we decided not to. Right now I'm not sure about where I want it to be, and I also don't think we'll ever have that much green mass at once. Also weeded out the area under the trees a little and removed the garbage at the same time. The whole property was full of bricks, pipes, iron pieces, plastic cans, bottles, and broken glass. The trash was all over. There were piles of rusty iron, tires, cans, even old radiators. It was a real garbage dump here. We've collected all the garbage into a large heap to carry it away later. And the worst thing were dry wooden branches scattered around, which had been cut down someday and left on the way. The grass and the weeds have grown through the branches, making it impossible to mow. I've dragged the wood into a separate pile. We'll cut them later and use for stoking the fuel boiler. After cutting the grass with a trimmer, I mowed it with a lawn mower for about 3 times, and now it looks so much better. It's not a real lawn yet, but looks very nice and tidy. This part of the property is the most exposed one. There's plenty of sun, and this part is actually what you see when going out of the house. So here I'm going to make a beautiful rose garden. Since the house is so old, I think an English cottage-style garden would look the best. I'm really inspired by the Rosemoor rose garden, so here on the right, I want to recreate a row pergola like in the Rosemoor garden, and I have already started making the bed. I'll make 4 posts, each with an English rose and a clematis to climb the post, and the ropes hanging in between. And to fill the space under the posts, I've planted more English roses and all the perennials typical for a cottage garden, like geraniums, irises, salvias, as well as ornamental grasses and little boxwoods to make topiary balls. This bed curves around the lawn, and you can see it from the house entrance. The thing I don't really like is the fence. It is right opposite the house, and I would like to make these borders less obvious, so to say. So what I've decided to do is to plant clematis along the whole fence to cover it a little bit and make another bed full of roses and fir trees. The ex-owners had goats, and so we had a fenced-off piece of land here. We've removed the wire net, and we decided to reuse the net to make a support for clematis by hanging it onto the fence. It is quite sparse and you can't really see it from a distance, which is great. I brought a very vigorous clematis variety from my old garden, divided it into pieces and planted them along the fence. I also planted several roses here. The first one is an old variety, Mistress FW Flight. I saw it in the Bagatelle rose garden in France, and I was so much impressed. It blooms so abundantly that you can't really see the leaves. It was a little hard to find since the variety is very old and not as popular as Bobby James or Apple Blossom, for example, but I was lucky. This variety is once blooming, but I love it so much. I think it will look great when in full bloom. And I have also planted several musk hybrid roses here. They also look great from a distance, and they are so abundant flowering. So I think from the house they will look very nice, and with time roses and clematis will cover this fence completely. Right now, this space doesn't look very pretty because we have a lot of building materials laying around. But here on the left, we have a huge bird cherry tree, which I want to tell you about. It is very, very old and looks like a huge bush, which I love very much. This is actually my favorite shape of a tree. It gives a lot of shade, and here we're going to make a relaxing spot. We will place a little table and a couple of chairs to sit and enjoy the views of the garden and the house. And here I want to keep it a little less formal, and I want to plant a lot of shade-loving perennials like hostas and foxgloves and the Solomon seal. I think it will look amazing when finished. Along the back wall of our house, we have a line of trees. Some of them are really old and really huge, and I think they might be the same age as the house itself, like 100 years old. Also, there are a lot of smaller trees. Here we have several rowan trees, bird cherry trees, several birches. This line is pretty wide, like maybe 10 meters. So we have a little private forest right at the doorstep. All the space under the trees is filled with forest strawberries, and I have even found several mushrooms here. This part of the garden needs another big clean up. I'm going to cut all the young shoots, and also we need to remove all the dead wood laying around, which we also have quite a lot of. And after that, I want to fill the space under the trees with ferns and hydrangeas, rhododendrons, lilies of the valley, and other plants. The idea is to create a fairy tale looking forest, but to keep it looking a little wild. I haven't finished the cleanup of this part yet. There's still a lot to do. I would have never thought that I'd say this, but what was growing here was just gout weeds, a child's play compared to what we had already done. I just tore it off. Removing its roots is really time-consuming, but if you remove the leaves regularly, the gout weed disappears rather quickly. I also removed the young tree undergrowth. And here I have also started planting already. Several years ago I went to an alpine garden exhibition in Prague, and I was totally blown away by this arrangement. Those lady slippers orchids looked so beautiful. Unfortunately, they had been sold out, and I couldn't find planting material at reasonable prices ever since. But this autumn, when searching for rhododendrons to plant in this part of the garden, I came across a nursery selling rhododendrons. They had a good stock of hardy varieties, which I looked for, and they also had several lady slippers orchids in stock, so I just couldn't resist and bought 2 varieties. I've decided to plant them right under the huge stump. The nursery owner told me these orchids love rotten wood, so I've collected some from a fallen tree trunk and mixed with the forest soil. And here comes the orchid root. This large bud is going to bloom next spring, if it likes the place. I've planted the orchids and mulched the soil with rotten wood. To make a nice arrangement, I've added ferns and grasses. And a huge Christmas rose bush. I want this space to look nice throughout the year, so most of the plants have ornamental foliage, like grasses or hostas. I've also added pieces of moss. They used to grow on our roof, and I hope here in shade it will grow as well. And here is how it looked right after finished. I'm really pleased with the result. Hope the orchids will grow well here. Well, this is it. I hope you liked our garden video and we'll see you in my next one. Bye!